Most people picture a zombie outbreak spreading city by city, a slow wave rolling across the map. You imagine it starting somewhere obvious, a small town, a rural county, then creeping outward, state by state, giving you time to react. That model is wrong. Epidemiological transport modelling shows the outbreak seeds 40 cities simultaneously within 12 hours through a single airport hub. Not a wave, a network activation. And by the time the first news alert hits your phone, the pathogen is already in your city. This is the complete fall order sequence of American cities, modelled through real transportation network data, population density thresholds, and documented pandemic spread patterns. From first infection to final safe zone. Most of you will watch this outbreak reach your city without ever understanding the system that delivered it to your door. Let's talk about how this actually works. To model an outbreak, epidemiologists use compartmental frameworks, SIR modelling. Susceptible, infected, recovered. For a zombie pathogen, the model adjusts to SIZD. Susceptible, infected, zombie, dead. The math changes, but the mechanics don't. What drives the speed of any outbreak is a single number, R-naught, the basic reproduction number. The CDC defines it as the average number of new infections generated by a single infected individual in a fully susceptible population. Seasonal flu carries an R-naught of 1.3. The 1918 pandemic sat between 2 and 3. Measles, the most infectious disease ever documented, ranges from 12 to 18. A zombie pathogen transmitted through bites and fluid contact lands somewhere between 2 and 4 in open urban environments, higher in dense spaces, lower in rural isolation, but R-naught alone doesn't determine how fast a country falls. The critical variable is the incubation period. Here's where it breaks. A 6-hour pre-symptomatic window transforms every commercial airport into a distribution node. Not because the pathogen is airborne in the atmospheric sense, it rides inside people. Pre-symptomatic carriers who feel fine, look fine, pass through TSA, board a flight, and sit in a sealed aluminum tube with 180 other passengers for 3 hours. The pathogen doesn't need to be airborne, it just needs the air travel network. Picture the scenario. Patient 0 is introduced at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, the busiest airport on the planet, 106.3 million passengers annually, over 275,000 passengers daily, 150 plus domestic destinations served by direct flights. Within 6 hours of introduction, pre-symptomatic carriers have boarded flights to Chicago, Dallas, Los Angeles, New York, Denver, Miami, Seattle, Phoenix, and 30 plus additional cities. They land, they enter terminals, they board connecting flights. Within 12 hours, secondary seeding begins. Every major commercial airport in the country is contaminated within 48 hours. Not theoretically, mathematically. The flight network data is public. The connection maps are published. The passenger volumes are documented by the Airports Council International. And here's the piece that makes this irreversible. Bureaucratic response lag. COVID-19 demonstrated this with painful clarity. 72 to 96 hours elapsed between the first confirmed cases in most metro areas and any executive action restricting movement. During the 1918 influenza pandemic, Philadelphia held a 200,000-person Liberty Loan Parade despite warnings from public health officials. The result was every hospital bed in the city full within 72 hours and 12,000 dead within 6 weeks. The pattern is consistent. Institutional response always lags behind pathogen spread. By the time anyone shuts down a single terminal, the seeding is complete. The network has already fired. Now you watch the map light up. Tier 1, the hub cities. These fall first because they sit at the densest nodes of the transportation network. They don't fall in sequence because one infects the next. They fall nearly simultaneously because the airport network seeds them all within the same 12-hour window. The order reflects saturation speed, how fast internal population density converts seeding into overrun. Atlanta goes first, not because it's the largest city, because it's the largest node. Hartsfield-Jackson processes 106.3 million passengers per year through the single busiest terminal complex in the Western Hemisphere. 150 plus direct domestic routes. But Atlanta's vulnerability doesn't stop at the terminal. The city sits at the junction of Interstate 75, Interstate 85, and Interstate 20. These three corridors carry a combined 409,000 vehicles per day through the metro area on I-75 alone. When the airport seeds the infection, the interstate network distributes it radially in every direction within hours. Atlanta doesn't just fall, it broadcasts. Chicago follows within hours. O'Hare International runs 815 daily flight operations. The metro population sits at 9.4 million. That's 9.4 million people connected by one of the densest public transit systems in the country. The CTA moves 1.6 million riders on an average weekday. Packed trains, enclosed stations. The saturation rate in Chicago is catastrophic. But what makes Chicago a Tier 1 accelerator isn't just the density, it's the freight rail. Chicago's the largest rail hub in North America. 40% of all American freight rail passes through the metro area. Those rail corridors become refugee channels when highways gridlock. People follow the tracks, and the infection follows the people. Interstate 90 carries 327,900 vehicles per day. North, south, east, west. Chicago radiates infection along every axis. Dallas-Fort Worth seeds both coasts. DFW Airport serves 269 destinations, more than any other airport in the Western Hemisphere. Its central geographic position means a pre-symptomatic carrier from Atlanta connecting through DFW can reach Los Angeles, Seattle, Phoenix, or any West Coast city within a single additional flight leg. Dallas is the relay, the geographic middle of the network. Within 48 hours of initial seeding, DFW has forwarded the pathogen to every region the Atlanta hub didn't reach directly. The metro population of 7.6 million provides local saturation fuel, while the airport provides national distribution. Los Angeles is a different kind of collapse. 13 million people in the metro area. But the density isn't the primary killer here. It's the geography of movement. Los Angeles is the most car-dependent major metro in the country. Interstate 5 carries 500,000 vehicles per day through the metro corridor. When the outbreak triggers evacuation instinct, those vehicles don't move, they stop. 500,000 vehicles per day becomes 500,000 stationary targets per day. The highways convert from transportation infrastructure to stationary feeding corridors in under 6 hours. People trapped in gridlock on the 405, the 10, the 101. Engines running, doors locked, going nowhere. The infected don't need to be fast, they just need the traffic to be stopped. New York City is the fastest saturation of any American city. 27,750 people per square mile in Manhattan, the densest population center in the country. But New York's vulnerability extends far beyond the island. The I-95 corridor connects New York to the entire BosWash megalopolis. Boston, Hartford, New Haven, Bridgeport, Stamford, Newark, Philadelphia, Wilmington, Baltimore, Washington, D.C. 56 million people in a 450-mile continuous urbanized strip. One corridor, one infection highway. A pre-symptomatic carrier driving from New York reaches Philadelphia in under 2 hours. Baltimore in 3, Washington in 4. The entire northeast megalopolis is reachable from any internal node within a single day of ground travel. This isn't a city falling, it's a civilization corridor collapsing as a single unit. Here's the transition most people miss. You're thinking about the cities, the pins on the map, but the outbreak doesn't jump between pins, it flows along lines. Interstate highways are not escape routes, they are infection arteries, and the corridor dynamics determine how fast the spaces between cities fill with the dead. I-95 is the most dangerous road in America during an outbreak. 450 miles of continuous urbanization through the northeast megalopolis. 56 million people, with functionally zero gaps between metro areas. An infected individual entering a 95 at any point has unbroken access to the entire corridor. There's no choke point, no natural barrier, no stretch of empty highway long enough to create a buffer zone. The corridor functions as a single linear infection zone. I-5 runs the entire west coast, Seattle to San Diego. When Los Angeles gridlocks, the pressure wave pushes north and south simultaneously. Fleeing populations carry the infection in both directions through Sacramento, Portland, and into the agricultural Central Valley. The Central Valley produces 25% of America's food on 6 million acres of farmland. Refugee flows through this corridor don't just spread infection, they destroy the food supply chain. I-10 spans the entire southern border of the country, Jacksonville to Los Angeles, 3,100 miles. It connects every major southern metro: Jacksonville, Tallahassee, Mobile, New Orleans, Houston, San Antonio, El Paso, Tucson, Phoenix, Los Angeles. Each city is a node. Each stretch of highway between them is a corridor, and each corridor carries the combined traffic of local commuters, long-haul freight, and now, millions of panicked evacuees moving in every direction simultaneously. I-95 is the north-south spine. It runs from the Michigan border to Miami, passing directly through the Atlanta hub. This is the corridor that relays infection between the Great Lakes and the Gulf Coast. 409,000 vehicles per day on the Atlanta segment alone. When Atlanta falls, I-75 becomes a conveyor belt carrying infection in both directions. You need to understand what mass evacuation actually looks like, not the fantasy, the documented reality. Hurricane Rita, 2005. 2.5 to 3.5 million people attempted to evacuate Houston simultaneously. Interstate 45 gridlocked within hours. Vehicles were stranded for up to 24 hours. People ran out of fuel on the highway. Over 100 evacuation deaths occurred. Not from the hurricane, from the evacuation itself. Heat stroke in vehicles, collisions. A bus carrying elderly evacuees caught fire, killing 23 people. That was for a hurricane with days of advance warning and a clear directional threat. A zombie outbreak provides no advance warning and no clear safe direction. Mass highway evacuation is itself a death sentence. The Tier 2 cities absorb what the Tier 1 cities expel. Denver sits at the gateway between the Great Plains and the Mountain West. When Chicago falls and Midwest populations flee west, they converge on Denver. Interstate 70 funnels them directly into the metro. Denver's population of 2.9 million absorbs a refugee surge that overwhelms services within 48 hours. Miami is the southern terminus of I-95. When the BosWash corridor collapses, southbound traffic pours into Florida with nowhere left to go. Miami becomes a cul-de-sac. Houston carries 341,300 daily vehicles on its highway network and has 0 natural choke points. No river barriers, no mountain passes, no defensible terrain features. Houston is flat, sprawling, and completely open to ground-level approach from every direction. Now comes the assumption that kills the most people. The military will stop it. The National Guard will establish perimeters. The government has a plan. Here's the documented reality. During Hurricane Katrina, National Guard deployment required 3 to 5 days before significant force presence arrived in the affected area. 3 to 5 days. The outbreak saturates a Tier 1 city in under 72 hours. The Guard arrives after the city is already gone. Total active duty military strength is 1.3 million personnel. That includes 480,000 Army and 440,000 National Guard and Reserve, spread across every base, deployment and obligation worldwide. The entire active army cannot perimeter a single major metro area, let alone 5 falling simultaneously. New York City alone has 8.3 million residents across 302 square miles. You'd need a continuous human perimeter of over 60 miles just around Manhattan and the immediate boroughs. The math doesn't work. It has never worked. No military force in history has successfully contained an urban outbreak through perimeter alone. The hospital system collapses even faster. 920,000 staffed hospital beds nationally. 100,000 ICU beds. Baseline occupancy runs 60 to 70%. That leaves functionally fewer than 300,000 available beds for a nationwide surge. COVID-19 overwhelmed major metro hospitals within 2 to 4 weeks, and that pathogen had a mortality rate under 2% and an incubation period of 5 to 14 days. A zombie pathogen with a 6-hour incubation and a 100% conversion rate doesn't overwhelm hospitals, it empties them. Staff abandon posts or become patients themselves. But it gets worse. Infrastructure cascades. Power plants require continuous human operation for load management, fuel supply and maintenance. When operators flee or fall, the grid destabilizes within 24 to 72 hours. When the power grid fails, water treatment plants lose pumping capacity. Municipal water systems carry 24 to 72 hours of treated water in storage tanks and towers. After that, taps run dry. When water fails, sanitation collapses. When sanitation collapses, secondary disease vectors activate. Cholera, dysentery. Infections that kill people the zombies never touch. Grocery stores carry 3 days of perishable inventory under normal demand. Under panic buying, that drops to hours. Katrina destroyed 50,000 utility poles, knocked 50% of radio stations offline, and took 44% of television stations off the air. Communications collapse means no coordination, no evacuation orders, no situational awareness. You're alone with whatever information you had before the grid went dark. Every system Americans depend on requires continuous human operation, and continuous human operation is the first casualty of an outbreak. But here's what the same data reveals when you invert the model. The transportation network analysis that predicts which cities fall first also identifies, by negative space, where the outbreak wavefront arrives last, or never reaches at all. The same map that shows destruction shows survival. You just have to read the empty spaces. The criteria are specific. Minimum 50 miles from any top 50 airport, minimum 25 miles from any interstate interchange, independent water access, not municipal, not dependent on pumping stations or treatment plants that require grid power, agricultural viability, enough growing season, enough arable land, enough caloric yield per acre to sustain a community without external supply chains, natural defensibility, terrain that limits vehicle approach and creates observable choke points. 3 zones meet every criterion. The Ogallala Aquifer region, specifically the Western Kansas Corridor, Grant County, Kansas. Population density sits below 2 people per square mile. The nearest major airport is over 50 miles away. The nearest interstate interchange is beyond effective refugee flow range. But what makes this zone survivable isn't the isolation, it's the water. The Ogallala Aquifer is one of the largest underground freshwater reserves on the planet. Hand pump wells draw 5 to 25 gallons per minute without any electrical infrastructure. No grid required, no treatment plant, no municipal system, just a well, a hand pump, and functionally unlimited clean water. The growing season runs 140 to 170 frost-free days. Wheat, corn, and sorghum are already cultivated across the region. At potato-level caloric yields, 17.5 million calories per acre, 5 to 18 acres can feed 100 people annually. The land is flat, which limits natural defensive terrain, but the population density is so low that the primary threat, other humans, is statistically minimal. The Upper Peninsula of Michigan. This is the most naturally defensible zone in the continental United States. The Mackinac Bridge is the single road connection between the Upper Peninsula and the Lower Peninsula. One bridge, 5 miles long. A single demolition renders the Upper Peninsula accessible only by water or air. Population density averages 18 people per square mile. Functionally unlimited fresh water from Lake Superior, the largest freshwater lake by surface area on the planet. The growing season is shorter, 90 to 120 frost-free days, but potatoes, root vegetables, and cold weather crops are viable. The Upper Peninsula has been continuously inhabited and farmed for centuries. The limiting factor is the shorter agricultural window, not the agricultural capacity. The Ozark Plateau, southern Missouri and northern Arkansas. This is rugged terrain, steep ridgelines, narrow valleys, limited road access. The topography itself is a defensive barrier. Vehicles can't approach from most directions without using a handful of predictable road corridors that are easily monitored and blocked. Spring-fed water systems provide grid-independent supply. Big Spring alone discharges 276 million gallons per day. Cave systems offer shelter, storage, and concealment. Ridgeline positions provide observation and defensive advantage. Population density ranges from 15 to 40 people per square mile. The growing season runs 150 to 180 frost-free days. Diverse agriculture is viable. The Ozarks combine water, terrain, defensibility, and agricultural capacity in a single region. The evacuation decision window is the variable that determines whether you reach any of these zones. Tier 1 city residents have 12 to 24 hours from network activation, before ground-level corridor spread makes highway evacuation impossible. Tier 2 city residents have 24 to 48 hours. Remote rural populations on secondary roads have 72 to 96 hours. After those windows close, you're not evacuating. You're sheltering in place with whatever you have. Now pay attention to this. The popular assumption is firearms are the primary survival tool. FBI data shows trained law enforcement officers achieve below 10% headshot accuracy, beyond 25 yards under stress conditions. Untrained civilians perform significantly worse. Each gunshot registers between 140 and 165 decibels. That sound carries 1 to 3 miles. Every shot you fire is a dinner bell for every infected individual within that radius. Barrier defense always beats ammunition defense. Always. A reinforced physical barrier costs 0 ammunition, makes 0 noise, and functions 24 hours a day without fatigue. The full order map is complete. But the map doesn't answer the hardest question, the refugee problem. When pre-symptomatic evacuees arrive at your community's perimeter, you face a calculation with no clean answer. They might be infected, they might not be. Turning them away may condemn uninfected people to death. Accepting them may introduce the pathogen to the only clean zone left. This is not a tactical problem. It's a moral one, and every community will answer it differently. Normalcy bias compounds the dilemma. Amanda Ripley's research on disaster behaviour documents a consistent finding. 70% of people freeze during a crisis. They don't panic, they don't flee, they stop, they wait for instructions that aren't coming. They assume someone is managing the situation. Community leaders planning for evacuation must account for a majority of their population being functionally non-responsive during the critical decision window. You're not moving a community. You're moving 30% of a community while the other 70% stands still. Roy Baumeister's research on decision fatigue shows that sustained high-stakes decisions degrade judgment quality progressively. After 12 continuous hours of life and death choices, cognitive function deteriorates measurably. Military doctrine mandates watch rotation. No single decision-maker on continuous duty beyond 12 hours. Community survival requires the same structure: shared leadership, rotation, sleep discipline. The people who try to do it all themselves burn out and make the mistake that kills everyone. And there is the moral injury. VA research on moral transgression. Distress documents the long-term psychological damage from being forced to harm people who were recently neighbours, friends, family. The infected were human beings 48 hours ago. The psychological cost of neutralising them doesn't disappear when the immediate threat does. Coping requires community structure, shared burden, task-focused purpose, and the honest acknowledgement that survival carries a weight that never fully lifts. The outbreak was never a wave on a map. It was a network activation. 40 cities in 12 hours. Corridors linking them. Infrastructure failing behind the wavefront. The fall order sequence isn't a prediction to be debated. It's a consequence of architecture that already exists. The airports are built. The interstates carry their documented traffic. The population densities are census verified. The only variable is the introduction point, and the modelling shows the outcome barely changes regardless of which Tier 1 hub goes first. The network is redundant enough that every scenario converges on the same national saturation timeline within 96 hours. Survival isn't about fighting the outbreak, it's about reading the map correctly, understanding that the same infrastructure connecting American cities in peacetime is the transmission architecture that destroys them during an outbreak. The people who survive are not the best armed, not the most aggressive. They're the ones who understood the network, identified the negative space, and moved before the decision window closed. Look at the fall order map. Look at where you live right now. How many hours does the model give you? And where is your negative space? Stay safe. Stay geographically.